My stepfather completely ruined my life because he believes that his son deserves my fiancée more than I do. It's a heavy situation, so I want to share my story in detail. I lost my dad when I was 15. By that point, my parents weren't very close, so while my dad's death hit me hard, my mom didn't seem as affected as one might expect. I joined the military at 17, seeking a path to independence, and during my first year away from home, my mother remarried. I never really connected with my stepfather. We had different personalities, which led to frequent misunderstandings. He often made cutting remarks and told me to toughen up whenever I expressed frustration about something. These interactions led to arguments between us. I acknowledged that both of us contributed to these conflicts, but they never escalated to a serious level. After almost 5 years of service, I was medically discharged from the military. My mom and stepdad welcomed me back home, and although I told them my stay would be temporary as I found my footing, they insisted that I wouldn't need to pay rent. However, only about 3 days after moving back in, my stepdad privately asked me what I felt would be a fair rent amount. This took me by surprise, but since it was his house, we reached an agreement. I chose not to inform my mom, assuming he preferred to keep it private. I never asked for anything from them, not out of spite, but because I wanted to be independent. My stepdad had a son from a previous marriage, and while we didn't share many interests, I got along with him well enough. The main difference was that my stepbrother received substantial financial support from our parents. They covered his education, car, living expenses during college, and even after. I found it frustrating that I was expected to pay rent so soon after moving in when I was not much older than him. Nevertheless, I chose to move out after 3 months, eager to reclaim my independence. Shortly after, I met a girl I was infatuated with. It was my first relationship, and I was thrilled. When it came time to introduce her to my family, I felt nervous. My mom and I had a close bond, and I feared she might judge my girlfriend. However, my worries were unfounded. They connected beautifully, and my girlfriend, who had little family of her own, found a supportive relationship with my mom and stepdad. Their bond grew to the point where my girlfriend and my mom would hang out alone, which made me overjoyed. My stepdad even took a liking to her, enhancing our family dynamics. I admired my stepdad's resilience. He had overcome a tough past and built a successful career. After a year of dating, I realized my girlfriend was the one I wanted to marry. I shared this news with my mom and stepdad, and they were delighted. By this time, my girlfriend felt like a true part of our family. My mom gifted me her engagement ring that my dad had given her. I didn't have the funds to get a new ring, but I was thrilled because I knew my girlfriend would appreciate the ring for what it represented. She confirmed that it was perfect and far from just a placeholder. It was a moment of pure happiness as we began planning the wedding together. 3 months later, I received a concerning call from my stepdad, asking me to come over. I felt a sense of dread but went over after work. When I arrived, I found my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, and my girlfriend on the couch, visibly upset. My heart sank as I rushed to comfort my girlfriend, but my stepdad stopped me. He began accusing me of cheating on her throughout our relationship. I was taken aback and confused, wondering why he would say such things. I didn't understand what was happening or why my life was spiraling out of control. I found myself in a state of utter confusion and disbelief, standing in front of everyone present. I expressed to them that I do not even send texts to any women outside of my family, except for my fiancée. It turned out that a girl I had never met got hold of my fiancé's phone number and claimed that we had been in a secret relationship for over a year. This accusation shocked my fiancée. She had no idea I was in a committed relationship. The stranger sent her screenshots that supposedly captured our intimate conversations and shared personal details about me that a complete stranger would not know. It was like I was standing there completely blind to the storm brewing around me. I felt a mix of emotions, stunned, heartbroken, and filled with rage. I desperately pleaded with her from across the room to look at my phone, to see for herself that none of these claims were true. The sight of my fiancé and my mother both crying broke my heart even further, and soon I found myself in tears as well. In a fit of anger, my stepdad unleashed a torrent of insults aimed at me and forced me out of the house. He threatened that if I ever set foot on his property again, he would call the police. The weeks that followed were filled with a deep sense of loneliness as I attempted to reach out to my family through every possible means, calls, texts, voicemails, and various messaging apps, yet I was met with silence from them all. After several weeks, my stepdad finally called me, firmly instructing me to stop trying to reach my fiancée. He made it clear that I was no longer welcome in his home or around his family. I also tried to contact my mother, but she too was unresponsive. As time passed, the only communication I received from my mother was a text lamenting how sad and disappointed she was. My mother had always been close to her in-laws, especially since her own family was small, so they spent holidays with my stepdad's side. This left me feeling ghosted by the entire family. I saw pictures of their Christmas celebrations on Facebook, featuring my ex-fiancée in joyful moments, which felt like a dagger to my heart. The only family member who still reached out to me was my uncle from my dad's side, although even he seemed cautious in his interactions. It was only through him that I felt some glimmer of support. I believe he truly trusted my innocence in this matter. His kindness and fatherly affection brought me comfort during a time when I felt utterly alone, and I am forever thankful for his presence in my life. About 6 months following the fallout, I decided to leave the East Coast and start fresh in California, desperate for a change of scenery to escape the heartache. Almost a year later, I received a call from a number with an area code from my hometown, which was a rare occurrence. When I answered, it turned out to be my stepbrother, prompting me to hang up immediately. When he called back, I chose to ignore it, but his persistent attempts lingered in my mind throughout the day. Finally, I resolved that if he called again, I would answer, which he did later that night. The conversation was awkward from the start. He shared that my ex-fiancée had been deeply affected by our breakup, taking nearly a year to even start considering another relationship. I hadn't pursued anyone since we ended things, and it seemed my stepdad had encouraged my stepbrother to ask her out. Things went relatively well for the couple of dates they shared, but it didn't spark the connection that the two were hoping for. My stepbrother then relayed that my stepdad had suggested he should make it work with her since, in his words, I didn't get rid of her for nothing. Hearing those words nearly sent me into a tailspin of anger and frustration. To make matters worse, my stepbrother revealed that someone had taken on a false identity, pretending to be a mistress of mine and had forged some text messages to support the false narrative. The weight of this revelation crashed down on me, as he explained that he had confided in my stepdad about it but felt a moral obligation to come forward with the truth. He didn't want to keep such vital information bottled up any longer, but he also planned to tell my mother and my fiancée the next day. Grateful for my stepbrother's call as a courtesy, I asked him not to reach out to them just yet, allowing me some time to process the shocking news. That was just last Tuesday. Today, I texted him to let him know I was ready to talk when they were, and that they could call me whenever they wanted to. The uncertainty of what I will say or how they will respond weighs heavily on my mind. I anticipate tears and a myriad of apologies, but I am unsure whether I am prepared to offer forgiveness. The only person I have shared this new development with is my supportive uncle, whom I asked to keep it confidential for now. For a while, my therapist had chosen a week to take a vacation, and during this time, I found myself needing to express my feelings and share some updates. I plan to share a more extensive update later tonight. So far, I haven't received any phone calls from other family members, but I did have a nice conversation with my stepbrother, which was comforting. I truly value the support I've received from everyone and will make an effort to respond to all the comments I've received when I find the time. An important update is that my stepdad has turned my family against me as of February 6, 2023. Apologies for the delay in sharing this. It has been a busy workday, and my mind has been preoccupied with various matters. This morning, I received a call from my stepbrother, who explained in detail what had transpired over the past week. It turns out that my stepfather's account of the situation was not entirely accurate. He was very careful with his words, trying to protect himself legally while still making his intentions clear. My stepbrother, who is much sharper than I am, chose a different approach to address the issue instead of confronting my mother and fiancé directly, which likely would have led to a loud argument with our father. He managed to get a hold of my ex's phone to track down the girl involved, and it took him quite a long time to piece everything together. Eventually, he contacted her and arranged to meet in a public place to discuss what was happening. This girl turned out to be a Tinder match with my stepfather, suggesting that he had been unfaithful to my mother. This revelation understandably upset me even more. Even though the girl claims they did not have a physical relationship, that fact was irrelevant to me. My stepbrother spoke to her and shared my story, tugging at her heartstrings in the process. To be clear, she was fully aware of what she was doing, but perhaps hearing about my situation affected her more deeply. Regardless, she shared crucial information with my stepbrother. She was willing to accept $1,000 for making a phone call, and my stepbrother guided her on what to say, providing photographic evidence to support her claims during the call. He even asked her to share the information with my mother and ex, offering her further payment, but she agreed to do it for free. This all happened yesterday, while my stepfather was away on a business trip until Wednesday. My stepbrother narrated that the girl visited my mother and ex and revealed everything. The moment she started sharing the truth, tears began to flow from all three of them after hearing what had transpired. As for me, I was in California during this time, and I had informed my stepbrother that I would let him know when I was ready to be contacted. To add some context for everyone to understand the dynamics of my family, my mother and I were extremely close after my father passed away. We relied on each other for support. When I turned 16, I began drinking to cope with my feelings. I had promised my mother we would spend New Year's Eve together that year, but instead, I ended up out with friends, heavily intoxicated. She spent that night home alone, and I received a heartbreaking text from her expressing her sadness, which made me feel incredibly guilty. From that moment, I decided to stop drinking until my life took a turn for the worse. My mother has always been someone who needs companionship and struggles with being alone. As her marriage to my father began to weaken, I stepped in to fill that emotional void. But as I grew up and left home, my stepfather took my place, followed by my ex-fiancée, who also played that role in her life. Now, as for my ex, she had a complicated family history and faced significant trust issues due to her past experiences. Despite having endured some difficult relationships, she always spoke respectfully about her previous boyfriends, except for one who was physically abusive, which I consider a reasonable exception. Although I have been painfully shy, people often remarked on my appearance, especially younger girls who found me cute. I never liked being called cute, as it didn't feel particularly masculine, but I eventually learned to accept my youthful appearance and how often I would blush. The frequency with which I would blush was something I became acutely aware of over time. My fiancé is almost 3 years older than I am, and I have always had a preference for older women. This preference meant that I scarcely paid attention to the younger girls who often seemed interested in me, specifically those in the age range of 18 to 20. Despite my indifference, this attention from younger girls sometimes caused tension in my relationship. My fiancé often questioned my lack of interest in these girls, worried that I might leave her for someone younger and perhaps even more conventionally attractive. However, I always found her to be exceptionally attractive, honestly much more so than I considered myself to be. I made it a point to reassure her of this, emphasizing that I had no desire for anyone else. To clarify why I believe this situation arose, I felt compelled to share some background. My thoughts shifted back to a recent phone call with my brother. He had mentioned that both our mother and my ex-girlfriend wanted to reach out to me that day. I agreed, albeit with a sense of uncertainty creeping in. By 3 p.m., I began to feel confused, wondering if my brother was just trying to mess with me. It honestly caused me a bit of worry until I received a text from him asking if everything was okay. I replied affirmatively and inquired whether our mother and ex were truly going to call. He informed me they had been attempting to reach me for a few hours. When I moved out west, I had blocked both of them and had forgotten why I didn't block him. I felt grateful that I hadn't, as it allowed for some communication between us. I unblocked both my mother and my ex, and within about 10 minutes, I received a call from my mom. Her immediate observation was that I sounded different, which nearly prompted me to hang up right then and there. It took a considerable amount of self-restraint to respond with just a, "yeah." Almost instantly, she broke down in tears. I expected to feel a surge of emotions, but surprisingly, the pain of the moment overshadowed any relief or excitement I might have anticipated. She inquired whether I had received her texts, to which I responded that I hadn't, as I had her number blocked. I pointed out that if she really wanted to reach out, she could have made an effort. Though I recognized it might come across as a bit harsh, I felt it was a valid point. I was open to rebuilding some form of a relationship with her over time, and she seemed relieved by that. My mother also mentioned that she was in the process of collecting her essential items from the house before my stepfather returned and that she was planning to file for divorce immediately. I believed her. Despite my feelings towards her as a mother, she had never been one to take half-hearted steps. A part of me wished I could witness the look on my stepfather's face when he returned to an empty home. After my mother, my ex-girlfriend got on the phone and followed with her own tearful apologies. I felt slightly more moved by her words. I reminded her how many times I assured her that I would never betray her and how deeply I loved her. She seemed beside herself with regret. We talked for about half an hour, and it struck me that the conversation was somewhat pleasant, despite everything. I had convinced myself over the past year that there was no chance for us again, but hearing her made me wonder if there might still be something there. She told me that she still had the engagement ring, which upset me, leading me to suggest she give it to my mom, as it no longer belonged to either of us. I could see that my words hurt her deeply, and while I selfishly wanted the ring as well, I knew it represented a chapter in our lives that had ended. She asked if she could call or text me moving forward, and I agreed but cautioned her not to expect quick responses. She understood, and I gave her similar boundaries as I had with my mom, clearly stating that any potential for a future relationship was unlikely. She accepted that too. Finally, I spoke with my brother, expressing my appreciation for everything he had done. He was aiding my mother in collecting her belongings from my stepfather's house. He expressed his sorrow for what had transpired and mentioned he would inform the rest of the family about the situation. I felt little connection to them and had no intention of communicating with them. The only exception was my stepfather's mother, the oldest member of the family, who had wished me a happy birthday and a Merry Christmas over the previous year. Perhaps her age made her indifferent to the complexities of our family dynamics, or maybe she simply felt compassion. She doesn't seem to care about the situation, and while it's possible she may feel some guilt, I plan to reach out to her nonetheless. It feels strange to say all this, but I wanted to give a brief update. I am heading back home for my uncle's 60th birthday party during the first week of March. This will be my very first visit since moving out here, and I am looking forward to it. I definitely intend to spend some time with my brother as well. While I am open to seeing my mom and my ex, I have made it clear to both of them that I need to focus on my own healing, and they need to do the same. If anything significant occurs during my visit, I will provide an update afterward, but that's all I have for now. Additionally, this platform is one of the last social media channels I use. I have not been very active here over the last year for various reasons that are likely obvious. I honestly haven't come across many stories similar to mine in the comments, though I am interested if anyone can point them out. I am always willing to answer any questions that others may have about my situation to the best of my ability. Thank you to everyone for your understanding. On February 8th, I received a call from a number back home. I had deleted most of the numbers of people I wasn't in contact with, so when I picked up, I was surprised to find it was my stepfather. I simply said hello but then hung up and promptly blocked the number. Shortly after, I reached out to my mom, her fiancé, and my brother to check if they were safe. Thankfully, they are all doing well and are not near him. My mom is staying in a hotel that he is unaware of, while her fiancé and my brother are at their own homes and feel secure. Although he is not known to be a violent man, it's always better to be cautious. My brother informed me that he had received a call from my stepfather that morning after noticing my mom had left. He refused to answer, instead telling my stepfather what had happened and instructing him not to contact any of them. I'm unsure how long my stepfather waited, but about an hour ago, I received a message from a different number that said we need to talk. I am assuming that this message is from him, but I haven't responded yet. That brings us to the latest update. On the 29th, my stepfather's mother called me. I had her number saved because I was previously worried it might be my stepfather trying to gather information. Thankfully, it wasn't. She turned out to be a very kind woman who didn't have to show me any kindness but chose to. She expressed her concern for me and apologized on behalf of the family. I appreciated her compassion and wished her well in return. Unfortunately, it seems my stepfather has managed to turn my family against me. I apologize for the delay in updates. Work has been hectic, and I just returned home this past weekend. I decided to respond to that message, which indeed came from my stepfather. Out of curiosity, I called him back, and I used a different app to record the conversation, following some suggestions from others. I wish I could report that the call was revealing, but that would not be accurate. Hearing his voice made me uncomfortable. He asked how I was, and I told him to cut the nonsense, which made him laugh. The conversation lasted about 3 minutes and was largely unproductive. I asked him why he wasn't happy with my relationship. He replied that I wasn't man enough and that a woman like her would have been wasted on me. His traditional views on relationships are particularly amusing considering how little he understands about my relationship or her. My ex has always been against gender norms. She has a lucrative career and has made it clear she would never be comfortable as a stay-at-home mom. She often took the lead in our relationship, so there was not much substance in our conversation other than that. I am still unclear about what he hoped to achieve, but I told him not to call me again and hung up. Subsequently, I flew back home before the weekend last week and attended my uncle's birthday celebration. I had an enjoyable time, and my family was very welcoming. They expressed regret for not offering more support throughout everything. I have no negativity toward them, none of them were ever rude or dismissive. I hold no negative feelings toward any of the people involved in this situation. Recently, I had a conversation with my brother, and we arranged for a meeting at his place that included both my ex and my mother, scheduled for Wednesday night. When the day arrived, I went over to his house, and I encountered what I anticipated, a lot of tears and a great many apologies. I found it challenging to maintain my composure during this emotional gathering. During the evening, I spoke with each of them, my mom, my ex, and my brother, individually. My mother has already filed for divorce, which I view as a positive step, and I truly appreciate her decision to do so. The discussions we had that night were quite meaningful. While there was an unmistakable sense of strangeness in the air, I felt hopeful that we are making some progress toward healing our relationships. I had a good conversation with my brother, which was refreshing. It was nice to connect with him face to face again after everything that has happened. He apologized for the part he played in the events that unfolded, and I accepted his apology. It was clear that he feels genuine remorse for how things turned out and for the effort he has made to rectify the situation. I, on the other hand, have no lingering grudges. My ex and I spent much of the night engaged in a deep conversation. We've already been talking over the phone for the past couple of weeks, so part of our meeting was about catching up. After being apart for nearly a year and a half, we are both different people now, and this became apparent during our talks. We touched on some serious topics as well, reflecting on how complicated and painful everything had been, and how deeply affected I was by it all. She opened up about her journey and told me that she had begun seeing a therapist. During our discussion, she asked if I would be willing to accompany her to her therapy appointment the next day, on Thursday. I was genuinely impressed by her efforts over the past few weeks, and I truly appreciate everything she has done. I decided to go with her to the appointment, which turned out to be quite productive for everyone involved. Her therapist seemed to value my presence, and we continued our conversation even after the appointment wrapped up. Afterward, I took the initiative to invite my ex to go out on Saturday night. This plan is still in the works, and while I am uncertain about what the future holds, I wanted to express my gratitude for her hard work in attempting to mend what had been broken between us. I am also eager to see her in a different environment, away from the tension that has surrounded us recently. As far as updates go, things are starting to look more optimistic. I haven't had any encounters with my stepdad or his family since returning home, and I appreciate all the support I have received from friends and family during this time. The date on the 35th went exceptionally well. We had a pleasant evening together, enjoying dinner and then visiting an arcade, a place we used to frequent when we were together. This was the first date I had been on in almost a year and a half, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the experience. After the arcade, we went back to her place and continued our conversation, discussing the next steps we would take over the upcoming week before I returned to California. I recognize that distance will be one of the more challenging aspects moving forward, but I think it may ultimately help us maintain a healthy perspective without constantly being in each other's lives. I am grateful for all the support I have received from everyone throughout this journey. In another update, many people have expressed interest in hearing how things have been progressing. I have continued to stay in touch with my brother, my mom, and my ex. My brother and I maintain regular communication, and I can see that my relationship with my mom is gradually improving. I am genuinely glad to have her back in my life, even though it will take time for her to regain the role of a mother to me. My ex and I have spent considerable time discussing the best way to approach our situation. She traveled out to California to spend time with me, which was a lovely experience. As it stands, we are not officially together, and I believe that is for the best at this moment. Regarding my ex-stepfather, I have little information. He attempted to reach out to my mom several times after everything happened, but they did not get a chance to speak. Thankfully, he has not contacted me either, and I hope to keep it that way. Significant changes have occurred in my life, as I have recently moved back east for a new job, which is several states away from my family. I view this as a healthy step forward. I am open to answering any additional questions that anyone may have. Thank you once again for all the support during this tumultuous time.